Today on In the House, we sit down with Luis Garcia. Luis is a project manager for design build firm in Austin, Texas that specializes in 3D printed structures. Not only will you learn about Luis's journey through the design and construction industry, you will get to hear what unique challenges he and his team face every day while working with these innovative 3D printers. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening. Today on In the House, we have a special guest with us. We have Luis Garcia. Now, Luis, if you want to kind of dive in, let's take a moment and I want to get to know you and what it is you do. But kind of introduce yourself. Give us kind of the background. What's the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently a project manager for a 3D design build company here in Austin, Texas. My background I have a lot of design background and then also construction as well. So I grew up laying slabs. My family is a construction background from the beginning.
Foundation guys?
Foundation, yeah, from the beginning. So I grew up doing foundations all throughout my teens. Rather than people going to camps and stuff, I was digging trenches and getting rebar ready. So a little bit different. Yeah. And I hated it. Honestly, I hated it.
Well, your dad's an architect, so was he design build early on?
This was before he was registered. So he comes from all that as well. But yeah, so we started doing that a while back. That was his, what he's been doing for a while. I hated construction and tried to get away from it as much as possible. Yeah, came right back.
Awesome.
Ended up doing fine art for an undergrad at the San Francisco Institute.
Yeah.
Really awesome place. I feel like that's where I kind of grew up for 4 years. First time away from home, and to be in a place like San Francisco is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
Here in Austin.
So,
yeah,
okay.
Born and raised here in Austin. And then went to Cali as soon as possible, as soon as I graduated. And it was a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
Still kind of is, coming back. Studied fine art, photography, sculpture, just kind of lighting in general and how it affects a mood or an environment. And then slowly started finding myself being more technical or getting more and more technical throughout my projects and inside and outside of work. Got really into documentary filmmaking in the Bay Area.
Wow.
So I did a lot of that, running around, being a gaffer, being a cameraman. And I realized that these stories that we're covering, they're really incredible, but I want to be a part of those projects. I don't want to be behind the camera. So that changed. I decided to make that shift. There is a parallel between filmmaking and construction in a sense, like the gaffers, that culture, that world. They're kind of light construction. There's light construction involved in a lot of senses.
You got to build up something. Yeah, you got to stage something. You got to think of it before you go out and you actually do it. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see the parallels.
Designing for light is a huge parallel there too. Understanding your environment, the context. Everything's very site specific when it comes to photography. A lot of times you have complete control of your context in a studio per se. But then other times you're outdoors and you got to account for wind and all kinds of stuff. So being in that environment and having the realization that I want to be more involved in the subject matter rather than the documentation of the subject reminded me of where I was coming from and the capacity that I actually had to make a difference. So
yeah, you wanted to be more hands-on. You wanted to be your creator, not necessarily the one kind of documenting the process, right?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So how did you find yourself back in the construction world?
It was my thesis for undergrad. I created with the idea of light and photography. I ended up making objects and photographing them. So it was this weird using technology, documenting my process of sculpture rather than strictly photography, going out and finding a subject. I was trying to create my own subject. So I made a autonomous water generator in undergrad. So it was pretty neat. Went to a bunch of junkyards, learned how to weld, learned how to steam bend wood and created this device that is solar powered that creates water from pretty much, it's not reverse osmosis, but that's the technical way that it works. But it's really just a really inefficient air conditioning unit. And it creates condensation, and it collects that condensation.
Right.
And then it cleans it with a UV light. Right?
Okay. So it's essentially with maybe some filtration, it's safe to drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's really cool.
So we had these, thesis open nights or end of the year reviews, and people were showing their beautiful photos, and I have this 150-pound device there. And like, maybe I'm a little different than all these people.
That's good. You're standing out, man. That's awesome.
But you didn't come straight from your San Francisco to architecture, right? There was some time in between then.
So when I graduated was 2009, and that was kind of the middle of the recession. So I came back to Austin. It was difficult to find a job. I was getting a lot of people saying, "You're overqualified." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I'm trying to work here." So that was frustrating. I ended up going back to concrete, curiously enough.
Yeah.
Had a small crew. We went out and did pads. We would pour in the morning and then frame in the afternoon. And just getting that cycle.
Wow,
dude,
that's hustling.
That was hustling. So,
wow. Who'd you do a lot of work for? I mean, was it just small commercial type, or was it residential?
It was small with the school district. So whenever they move a portable or a sidewalk gets crushed by a bus or something, just smaller repair stuff like that. So started doing that, and then I jumped on and did a corporate gig with Lowe's for a couple of years. That was more of a project manager role in the sense of their rollout of all their new, I don't know exactly what they're called, their new products that roll out, jumping store to store, making sure everything is in line what they're expanding on. And I didn't feel like that was really real. I didn't feel like I was in construction. It was too manicured. You know?
Yeah, it was too corporate.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and I was coming from laying concrete, and I was like, I'm just going off a checklist right now. I want to get back in the field. So I realized I wanted to go back to architecture school and get my license and do my own thing, design build. Ultimately, that's what my dad does as well, and at a small capacity. So with that in mind, I needed a job because now I was an adult and I didn't have anybody paying, helping me to pay for anything. So I found the fire department in Houston. So I joined the fire department, did that for about 7 years, which I had no idea, or I didn't expect to have any parallel with construction either, or design per se. But I learned a lot. I learned a ton. Interestingly enough, some of the most interesting, I was taking a few classes in urban design at the same time Harvey was happening. At the same time, I was out, with the fire department. So a lot of things came together and really tore my mind open. That was pretty interesting, and still just now unpacking what I've learned. So, and also understanding what the code means. So our projects in studio, we try to make them as realistic as possible. In some classes, you know that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just do whatever you want. But a lot of times the projects that I enjoyed were more based in reality, and you did have to follow.
Yeah, meaning.
And they had a real site with, you have to follow the codes, if not anything else. So really understanding what the fire code is, what it is on paper, and understanding what it feels like in real life. There's a huge disconnect there, I think, with designers. And I can remember specifically a couple times at work, like, oh, that's why there's an exit within 30 feet of every door. Because I'm on the ground and I can't find how to get out of here. I can't imagine if people put an exit wherever they wanted, In the back of your head, you're like, I know how this place, what it looked like on the outside, and I know what the codes are, so there's got to be a door right here, right around the corner.
That's interesting.
You ever feel like it was scary to go in it that way, where codes are usually built off of reactive things, like something bad happens, a bunch of life's lost, and it's you go to protect the the people, and then do you feel like that is something that is a good parameter to have where it's not just pie in the sky idea, so it gives it something real? Or do you think that that can ultimately like make your thing look like a code derived building? Do you ever have that battle?
Absolutely, I think everybody does. Some projects are, you can tell they're code derived.
Yeah.
You walk into a project like, wow, this is code and Revit derived. You know?
Yeah.
You can see the process, and in my process of design as well, I feel like there's it's a conversation. Each project that you're undertaking is a conversation and a solution. Ultimately, it should be a solution, I think. In that sense, every site has a problem, whether it's building on a cliff like we're here, or on the side of a hill. If it's utilities, if it's too windy, if it's you got to figure out what the problem is, and then design around it. So that's what I love when I travel. It's to find how different cultures have solved. Number one, recognizing the problems they have, and number two, how they've solved it. I think that's one of the richest things you can do with traveling is start asking those questions. But yeah, that's our biggest battle. Is we have to solve this problem, but we also have all this baggage that our culture brings with us for life safety and whatnot, which is completely understandable. But having that dance, that's what makes you a really good designer.
So you say you like to travel. I mean, where have you been to most recent, I guess? What sticks out in your head? What's the most fun place or most interesting place you would say?
I went to Mexico City about 2-3 weeks ago.
Okay.
I hadn't been there in about 10 years, so that was really nice to revisit a city that is so old, has a ton of history, personal as well. That's where my family ultimately comes from, and also seeing how do you feed 20 million people every day? How do you take their waste away? How do you know? And then how do they live in a seismic zone? What makes these and how are they reinventing themselves? Ultimately, you can make a big city, but is it sustainable? As much as I hate Houston, well, I won't say I hate Houston. You can cut that out. As much as Houston is uncomfortable, I didn't feel like it was the most comfortable place to live. I do feel like it has reinvented itself several times over the last 40, 50 years. And that's what makes it so sustainable. And it's going to get its time soon. Seeing the urban planners that are really stepping forward, and at least this new administration are making a lot of strides to make it more of a walkable city and attract new industries. It's always neat to see that.
Did you ever see that plan for they wanted to put a dome over Houston? They were going to put like a mile tall dome, like a Buckminster Fuller dome over Houston.
No, what was behind that? What was
just climate control.
Yeah.
Dude, it's Houston.
Brutal.
Yeah, humidity plus the heat.
It is.
I grew up in Houston.
Yeah. Oh, which part?
I think we were more out towards Katy.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to a school in Katy, but yeah, we grew up there. I mean, we moved several times. I was born in Houston, and we lived there for a while, and then we moved further out, into like Navasota. I don't know if you know where Navasota and Brenham is. And then we ended up, for whatever reason, moving back to Houston, and then we finally wound up in Brenham. So that's kind of where we stayed all throughout, middle school and high school. But yeah, I'm definitely, my parents own a business in Houston, so I'm familiar with the area. And yeah, it's definitely brutal down there. It's bad.
The climate's brutal, but when you look at it from a professional standpoint, how do you attract people to a city like that, knowing that the climate sucks? And it's got, the space city aspect to it. It's got NASA. It's got the medical center, the largest medical center in the world. Obviously the oil industry as well. So you have all these different people that came in at different times and just keep that sucker going.
Yeah. It's definitely very industrial. It's not the prettiest looking
not at all.
city, but it's definitely set up for business. It's the feeling you get.
I mean, I think it's a macro and a micro issue, right? It's the macro, like you said, like in Mexico City, when you looked and it was a seismic zone, like how do they build here? How do I get wastewater? How do I deal with freaking 20 million people? I think that it's at that scale, but there's that little development the Shoe's doing off of in the Heights. Have you been over there off of like Shepherd and and Heights Boulevard? Yeah, where I think you go back and you look at the micro scale, right? It's like, how do I make it where it's walkable, where I don't have food deserts, that you make attractive like things for the community to buy into and to have as their own. And so I think that, you know, as this sinew, this strip of things slowly links to each other, it's like I don't know, radiates upon itself. So I think it's a grassroots effort too. It's
absolutely, yeah.
In Houston, right? There's no zoning, so there's you can have a little bit more fun with what's next to each other, for better or worse.
It's the Wild West.
Yeah, it's wild out there.
It's crazy.
And so, yeah, I do think it's land of opportunity. And I always gave Houston a hard time. Like I drove through it to go to Galveston. That's all that was.
Same.
But stopping in grad school and spending time there, like I figured out, I liked it a lot, man. There's a lot of
it's got a lot of culture.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, what's the most diverse city in the United States? It's a quarter white, quarter Hispanic, quarter Asian, and quarter black population. Like New York doesn't have that, Chicago doesn't have that. So by demographic alone, it's a thriving city.
And it does have walkable neighborhoods. You go to Montrose, and the Heights is turning into that right now. So you have these little pockets, and like you're saying, the contemporary move is like to link those up. You know, that's really neat to see, to make more loops within the loop.
Right, within the loop. Stop the sprawl, baby. Just come back to the city center. Let's densify your city centers.
And then you have City Center, which is a completely different thing, where you're trying to make this grassroots effort, you know, just dropping it. And it's supposed to be an incredible development, but it wasn't built from the ground up. It doesn't have the old trees. It doesn't have the buy-in from the community either. So I always fought against that. I remember in grad school, they talked about it a lot, in the Woodlands as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not the same as the Montrose, you know?
Yeah, I worked with Susan Rogers in Magnolia Park, where they would have these artists that come out of the city, and what do? They'll go to New York. They don't retain anybody. Yeah. Everybody leaves for something else. And so the specific project I worked on was to be able to keep these people that are homegrown to stay, you know, Beyonce, baby. Let's stay in Houston and do something with it.
That is the hard part, yeah. You keep people there.
Well, so tell me a little bit more about some of your hobbies. I mean, you said you kind of had an interest in, or a background in photography, right, and video. I mean, do you still kind of play around with that, or?
Absolutely, yes. So I have.
Well, you travel and write. You do photography and kind of document some of that. Okay. Well, sorry. Continue.
Well, no, yeah. I feel like I do that every day.
Yeah.
My role right now, my current position, I have to do write-ups every morning, so I don't to document, photograph, write everything down. That I use it as a time to journal as well. Like my write-ups can get pretty kind of personal as well.
Sure.
And I try to be specific, but also give it an edge to it.
So this is like a daily log that you do for the company.
Absolutely, yeah. To let them know that we're on track, or where we are, and what to expect the next day, and what we encountered. Especially these last couple of weeks with the heat. The heat has been pretty detrimental to both the team and the site.
Yeah.
Just making it very difficult to keep going at a certain pace.
For sure.
But again, to piggyback on that, coming from the fire department, there's preparing yourself for a tour at the fire department. That you do a tour of duty, which is 2 or 3 days at a time. Coming with that mentality, you prepare yourself, sleep right, eat right, hydrate yourself. When it comes to running a small team outside, teaching them, hey, this is what I expect from you. You're not just working here. You need to go hydrate. You need to get 8 hours of sleep. That's part of your job.
Yeah, well, you're taking care of them. I mean, because if they're not performing, then you'll not perform.
Absolutely.
So you gotta take care of them too.
But yeah, when it comes to photography and videos, I do a lot of journaling when I travel. I like just to kind of meditate and take a sketchbook with me, and try to realize how a certain when I do pick a spot to visit, it's usually for 1 or 2 structures, and I'll just go for a weekend and just meditate at those areas and walk around and try to figure out, you know, what was the problem and what was their approach and how did they solve it, and sketch it all out.
That's very cool. Do you put that anywhere online? Is there anywhere we could go to kind of tap into that?
I haven't yet. No,
Dude.
no. But it needs to be opened up, because there's some really incredible spots. Just thinking about the heat recently, I went back through my journals and was looking at Morocco and seeing what I had written down for Marrakesh, and the details. You know, it was 110 degrees outside, but in the city center, I'm just in a t-shirt like I'm dressed right now. You know, running around with the tour guides, seeing everything. And what they did, obviously the courtyard aspect is huge for their design.
Talk about that.
Okay, so their family structure is similar to different than here. You have multi-generational housing in one unit. They're large too, maybe half a city block. In the center, you have I forget what they're called.
Fountain?
No, they have a specific name for what they call their the Riyadh. Is it Riyadh? The Riyadhs, yeah. So Riyadh comes from the name for garden. So every home has a garden in their center, and the way it's designed is it provides natural ventilation as well. You know, all the heat goes straight out, and all the rooms, each family has a floor to themselves. So everyone kind of meets in the center, and it's really beautiful and beautifully ornate inside, using light colors to help with to dissipate the heat. On the outside, you would have no idea how cool they are on the inside.
Right.
Both cool visually and cool temperature as well. From the outside, they're just stucco, just mud, and they're
Kind of on these unassuming boxes.
Super unassuming. Yeah. And you're like, oh man, what is this? And once you walk in, it opens up on itself, and it's completely gorgeous. Also, the urban planning, or the getting a little bit bigger outside of the scale of the family home. Now you have the neighborhood. The streets are tiny. Cars, you don't see cars anywhere. All the cars are on the outside, on the perimeter.
Love that.
And it helps. You know, these buildings are 30 feet tall. The sun is never going to reach the bottom of it. You know, maybe at noon on a few streets that are perpendicular to it or in line with it. But they're always in shade, and there's always some kind of cross ventilation happening throughout the entire neighborhood. So that's just little things like that.
Are there, I'm assuming, well, you say the streets are really small. I'm assuming all these structures are kind of right next to each other, right? Hugging each other.
I say at most like 10 feet. They're more like alleys than streets. Absolutely. Like notes like that can help influence, you know, maybe a project 10 years from now that I do.
Dude, we got to make like a blog or something, man. This is awesome. I'd love to watch, watch the video or look at the pictures and read the description. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out, man.
Yeah. And with the fire department too, I tried starting that. Like, hey, so this is what it looks like. 25 feet fire lane. What does that mean? I know it's a pain in the ass because, you know, I don't have 25 feet. I need X amount of parking spots, and now you're saying you need 25 feet. This is why you need 25 feet, and try turning a fire engine around. This is the real part that hopefully you never have to encounter, but somebody's going to have to encounter.
Yeah.
Demo day. Anybody can go out to this wide open parking lot and park this thing right here.
See? And guess what? You're on the 10th floor. You're looking out the window waiting for these guys to come, but you didn't follow the 25-foot rule, so you can't get in. Think about that. There's a lot of little moments like that.
Well, I wanted to go back to what you said. I guess getting more into, you know, what you do. I don't know if have we gone over that yet. Can you kind of describe specifically, you know, what it is that you do professionally on a day-to-day? I mean, describe your day.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm doing a lot of project management with a 3D printing construction company. We use large-scale 3D printers to print concrete and to do commercial and residential structures, wall systems at this point. My role is to be on site every day and get the guys and the machine running. We're the boots on the ground. So I specifically, my role is communicating between the architects, the engineers, the client, and the operators.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of different hats every single day going through. Make sure everybody knows where we're at, what we need, and if we're not operating for some reason, why we're not operating. So communicating some crazy engineering opportunity or malfunction to the client who knows nothing about G code or
Sure. It's unique problems. It's not like you're coming in like it's something any other construction manager in the world. You've got unique problems.
This is all foreign. Yeah.
Yeah. It's unique on the side of the resolving the problem, but it's also unique in how you're putting this thing together. And it's never been you're encountering things that have never been solved before. So you're at the spearhead of the development of this type of building.
Absolutely, yeah. So the boots on the ground is really where this thing becomes real. So before, there's a lot of testing done to make sure these wall systems work, but you really don't know what's going to happen until you get out there and have a crew. And then there's so many different conditions. The slab could be completely different than the test slab.
Like you kind of alluded to earlier, the heat.
Mm-hmm.
The heat and temperature and humidity can have a big effect. So, I mean, what are some of the challenges that you faced recently with the heat? I mean, what is that?
Thankfully, with the heat, it could affect both the system and the team. With cold temperatures, it affects more the system than the team. The team we can just bundle up.
Mm-hmm.
But with the heat, it's the opposite. The system, so far from what we've seen, it can operate pretty well still.
Yeah.
The team is really what is suffering or taking the brunt of it.
So who's out there in the field? Because I'm thinking of like a typically built house. You have your concrete slab, and then you have your framers come throw up some walls. But this is completely different in the sense that you're printing this layer by layer. So when you say the team, like is it who's actually out there with you and what's happening?
Yeah. So the spiel too. The reason why 3D construction is an option right now, or the opportunities that 3D construction provide, are number one, a small crew. So the crew currently is 4 individuals, and they each have their role of where they are and their specialty. That's where we are right now. Number 2 is understanding the product, knowing how much concrete we need to print the structure. So there's very little to no waste. That's another huge selling point. The third is going to be your the thermal barrier of the wall system.
Yeah.
That is probably the biggest effect that we can have with this technology is not having a thermal barrier and better insulation that is difficult with other technology or CMU or stick frame construction. So those are 3 things that I've seen. Our team is 4 guys. Our project typically lasts about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the size. So we're in. They each have their task on the slab. Compared to traditional construction, that is pretty low, pretty nominal. And then how we interact with the other trades. This is something that is still constantly being changed and modified and massaged. Because third parties come to the site and it's a shock every time.
Yeah.
So number 1, plumbing currently is pretty traditional, coming up from the ground. The electrical, we have cutouts in the walls at certain heights, and that's all code related. So they're comfortable with when they approach that.
Do you try to avoid running the plumbing in the printed wall?
Yes.
Okay, you
Yes.
try to avoid that as much as you can. All right.
Absolutely, yeah. We found that the 2 places, that's the other thing about concrete. Concrete is immortal, honestly. It's going to be 50 to 100 years. That's the goal for most things you do with concrete. So our culture is a little different. We want to change things every 10 years or so. So understanding that, I think the designers have a different approach as well. The 2 areas that we found where people want to make most modifications are going to be the kitchen and the bathrooms.
Sure.
So those, rather than printing out every single wall, it makes more sense just to do the envelope. And then you can
Kind of infill from there. And,
yeah, you can have little pony walls and whatnot to define it. So that kind of alludes to having stuff outside of the walls, so they can be changed easily.
Fair enough.
Or modified.
Yeah, and that was awesome. I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to dive into as well. I mean, you're saying that you have these other trades. Y'all are still training them in a sense to get used to this because it is so new? I mean, what challenges do you face? So you're saying it's 4 to 6 weeks that's just for the printed structure itself, or is that to dry in where you got windows and doors and roof on?
No, that's just the wall system. Yeah.
Okay, so then you have a framer come in and do, I'm assuming, right, your roof structure and your interior partitions and install windows and doors. And yeah, what are some challenges that you might face with kind of training them and getting used to the system?
Yeah, that's just being on site and making sure they're using the details. So the architects have done a great job of testing off-site several different iterations of how, number one, was best structurally and will last the longest, using tools kind of off the shelf. We don't want to have things that are too specialty because then it gives us more overhead, and that's never good, obviously.
Sure.
So they've done a great job of streamlining and creating incredible details to hand over to the third-party guys. It's just making sure that everything is correct and there's nothing lost in translation.
Right. Yeah, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of,
Absolutely. And for us as well. This is all new. Every project has a new challenge. And that's what I find really exciting as well. I personally try to take the projects that I know are going to be a real pain in the butt because that's where you're going to have the most knowledge transfer. When it comes to most apertures, windows and doors in the structure and the envelope, for at least the commercial structures, we're trying to go floor to ceiling, not so much an aperture because it makes it more difficult for the printer and just everybody in the back end. So that's one way around things too. Okay. It's just if there's going to be if you want a window there, it's going to be a window. It's going to be the whole thing.
Yeah. Visually though, I kind of like that. Yeah. I like floor to ceiling. I mean, that's very appealing. So another question I had was about inspections, because this is new, in regards to just the material and the process. It's not your typical. It's not built like your typical building. So what challenges do you see with inspectors? And, have there been any big headaches, I guess?
Yes, the inspectors, well, thankfully at this point, we are AC 509 certified, so that there's not a lot of people trying to push back on the product. One thing around that is, I think with the inspections, because we are using concrete, we still have to do quality control, and we're not having we don't have the same inspections.
Sure.
Like you're not gonna show them. You're not gonna bring an inspector in before you cover up a wall.
Right.
To do
because that's your finished product.
It's done. Yeah, absolutely. So throughout the process, there's a lot of documentation. This goes back to photographing and using other technologies to organize this information. So they're rather than coming out to the site, they're looking at a packet that you've created, so they can see all the rebar that was placed correctly, and also helps the homeowner if they want to do future modifications. We can let them know, hey, this is where the rebar's at. Give this to your contractor. Don't tap here, don't tap there. At these elevations. These are where the columns are. Everything behind the wall system. Also, because we are using concrete, we do have a lot of quality control. We have to send samples off for breaks.
I was going to ask those, and my next question was if y'all did break tests.
Yep, throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, and it actually helps us to work within our means. It gives us a better product because we know what works, what kind of material we want at the nozzle. So then what you should expect, when they break it 28 days later at whatever point.
Well, how often are you testing? Do you have to test every day or every new batch of concrete? Does that have to be?
Yes. Well, not every, but there is a pretty extensive log. We test for ourselves in the sense that we want to keep the material in a certain range. Yeah. So we're doing slumps and temperature and air, taking samples of all that. All that information may not go in the final product when it comes to this packet that I'm speaking of, but it does keep us help us keep everything in line. The breaks that are recorded, they're at certain intervals of the wall. They're built in.
I gotcha.
And that's given to us by the material science department.
Is your concrete in house? Because I know you use a proprietary mix,
Yeah.
so you have your own mixing facility that produces. Oh, okay. Well,
Everything's proprietary
Yeah.
at the moment.
so you're not getting concrete from any of these other mixing facilities. You have your own place set up where you just have concrete on hand whenever
Absolutely.
you need it. 'Cause, you got to, because it's got to be a continuous.
It's a tricky dance because
Yeah.
we want it to be flowable enough that you can pump it 200 feet in a 2.5 inch tube.
Yeah.
But then also it needs to set quickly because you want to put another layer on top of it within 20 minutes. So that's why it's proprietary.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's a dance. It's a dance with the material.
A lot of what I'm doing nowadays is trying to figure out how we can do factory built housing. It's architect designed, and that it's done by the time that it leaves the factory. So it's all
So modular, what you're saying. Right?
yeah, modulated units, and that they have some flexibility in getting these factories to crank these things out. So the idea is that once that thing comes to the site, it's done. You hook it up and then it goes. Is there something in the future where there is a 3D printed slab, wall, roof? I don't know how you do the plumbing. You can't do the plumbing, but like where it's just a one and done solution. It's like a completely 3D printed something.
Yes, absolutely. And other companies have different strategies as well. There are some companies that are completely modular, and everything they do is in a warehouse, and they ship it out. They'll send you wall segments. Currently, we are not doing that, but the goal is to do everything, the entire envelope. There's a lot going on in R&D, and with the structural engineers, that becomes more of that's more of their realm. Yeah, for sure, to solve those. And I think a lot that also affects not only the structural engineers, but also affects the product engineers. So how do we make a printer that can do it all?
Oh yeah.
Does that mean
how does the
pump?
tool?
Does that exactly? That changes the tools too.
Well, it's a two-way conversation. I love that. It's not just one way in. You make this thing. Well, this thing's saying, "I can't make this. I can't make." So it spits it back to it, and so you can adapt and change it.
And so right now in the industry, kind of what we're doing is just pushing the machine, seeing what can we do with these things.
Yeah.
We know what we can do with the desktop, but this thing is huge. What are the limits? At what point? How fast can we go? Or how slow can we? There are so many different factors that you can test before you start getting to these really complicated geometries. That's just another facet of it.
Do you think to kind of forecast a little bit into the future? Do you think so right now you're just doing one machine per structure? Do you think there's ever a time where you'll have multiple print heads going at one time, or maybe you're printing with separate materials? Like I know some 3D printers, the desktop version, you can swap out filaments and colors and on the fly, and so it kind of gets me thinking, like, can you do that? Can you scale that up and start printing different materials as you go, and kind of change the color of the wall? And
definitely. One thing, that's definitely coming down the line for sure. There's also the geometries that are, so the machine has its scope, and we're just trying to understand what the limits are at the scope.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, as we're moving, the machine's changing as well,
because
we find certain aspects aren't keeping up, and they need to be modified. So there's this constant, like, horse and carriage. They're both moving at the same time.
Yeah,
honestly, it's not one against the other. There's constant learning on the product side as well as the design side. Each project that I've taken on, I've been met with a different type of printer. Not different type, but modifications to it that give it different qualities.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely, it's changing very fast on both fronts.
And I know when we had Nathan, when we talked to him, I think you had asked, oh gosh, can't remember the question now. It'll come to me.
Why he's so handsome?
Yeah.
Why?
No, it just.
Nathan has
What's the
lots of
skincare
I had it.
routine? Which one?
I had it on the tip of my tongue, and it's gone now.
Something about design, something about
yeah,
form,
something along those lines. I can't remember now. It'll come to me later. I ain't gonna worry about it.
That was an awesome story, man.
So, thank you. Comes natural. For
should
whatever
be
reason,
sorry.
I had that
You're
right
sorry.
right in my head, and I can't remember what the. I was gonna ask you the same thing, and I can't remember the question now. So anyway,
material. 'Cause I think there's something to be said about the material. One thing that I've heard, the easiest thing to bash about using concrete is the carbon emissions.
How much does your building weigh?
That's a good one. I don't know off the top of my head.
No. It's a question by Mr. Foley about like thinking about what a house is at the end, or a building
Gotcha,
is
yeah,
at the
yeah.
end of the day. But what were you going to say about that?
The material wise, so why concrete? I think one of the biggest things with 3D printing is the low head count, the low labor, again the thermal efficiencies, and and the waste. Knowing the waste, being real specific with the material. There are other individuals looking at hybrid material as well, so it's not all concrete, because that is a very carbon heavy product, and we understand that. Everybody understands that.
yeah.
But I think at this
Well,
moment,
okay, so let's pause. Maybe for a listener who's not necessarily in the know or in the industry, when you say something is carbon heavy, especially like concrete, can we explain that so everybody's kind of on the same page?
concrete is very. What's the best way to explain that?
I guess it takes a lot of energy to produce
Yeah.
concrete.
And there's not much product after you're done with it. What
Yeah.
do you do with it? Like,
Right.
It's waste. And
It's ultimately. It's just it's heavy as well. So getting it to your site,
Transporting it, yeah.
everything about concrete is labor intensive or energy intensive.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a very strong and pretty immortal kind of product as well.
I was curious as to why you said 50 to 100 years. It seems like with concrete, you do a good space that it can push past that threshold.
Yeah.
You could, yeah. That's just a number that, seeing other CMU and stuff. So
Yeah.
That's a kind of known number, but
Yeah.
who knows? Absolutely.
We need to increase these life cycles, and then if you can get that 3-4 times over traditional construction, then you're beating.
Now you have a
that.
product,
Right?
yeah.
Especially if it can hold up to time. That's the thing, is these elements. I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about, I'm going to botch it, but whatever, I'm going to say it. In the 80s, there was 8 days that there were 100-degree days. And now they're forecasting in 2030 it's going to be like 34 days or something. Mm-hmm. They said it's twofold. It's the heat island effect of, pouring more concrete in our city centers, and then global warming. And so we need more out of our buildings. We can't build the same thing. And so, and the way the codes are adopted, I don't want to have this just be a code fest, but is that it's slow to be able to get to the next level of things. And so I think it pushes it back to the construction and the designers and the architects of the world, where we have to be forward thinking. We need to see the codes for what they are, which is baselines. They're the minimums that we have to achieve. And so I think that the real winners here in the next coming decades are going to be the people that figure out this problem and adapt and solve the problem before somebody implements a system that you have to do this.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up some incredible points.
Man in the arena. Sorry, I'm gonna point that out. You got to be forward thinking, and not afraid to get out there and make mistakes.
Reactive. We're so reactive.
Yeah.
About
That's
things.
our job to take that. I think just that changing that perspective, instead of having these are the codes, but that's the minimum. I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to change it, and I think that's one thing that 3D printing does too. It's at the end of the day, it's really just a huge experiment. Does this work? Is this a good avenue? We won't know until 20, 30 years from now.
And I remembered what I was going to ask earlier. You had asked Nathan about
Skincare.
No, it wasn't skincare. It was any follow-up reviews with any people who actually are
post-occupancy evaluation. POs,
and so my question for you was, I mean, you're out there dealing with it every day. Are you getting immediate feedback from people who are working with the material and the machinery and
Yeah, I can answer that part. No, but we really don't have a lot of post from the residents. That's what you're trying.
Yeah, that was the question that we had asked.
Okay.
Nathan is there a year
Yeah, I think
30, 90 days.
For me being in the field, it's really educating the team on how aggressive the material is and how to protect yourself from it. Because it will tear you up, and you can have allergic reactions to it, and it can make things really uncomfortable for people.
Sure, yeah.
But it inspired something else that I was thinking about too. Is that one thing that I think one of the reasons why a lot of heads turn as well, not just because there's a giant robot at the lot, is the material we're using, concrete. In most parts of the world, concrete, you see it at the residential level, not just the commercial level. Here in the U.S., we don't really see that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different. It's
very much so.
And I think there's something to be, to start a conversation on that.
Yeah, but those buildings are standing up for 500 years. They're they're old. They're not going anywhere, and there's value to those things. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, let's push this 100-year mark out.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Who's creating these metrics on what we need our buildings to perform?
And then this idea of homes doing more, or not homes, but design doing more, or buildings doing more for us than they're currently doing. That's a huge one too. You can have a whole course on that. How to flip that and make things work for us.
Yeah.
On my personal little studies and sketches and whatnot, I'm trying to work on a home or a compound that is just a bunch of little tests, a bunch of structures that are testing different ideas.
I love that. A bunch of follies. Yeah, dude.
So over here, this is, it didn't work.
I got some land you can come test on.
Let's do it. I had this idea of the car. Like, we invest so much into this car, but all it gets is from A to B, which is great. But I think it can do a lot more. I think, why are we...
Put a bed in it.
Could take off into the sky.
Well, I mean, energy-wise, it has a motor in it. Like, use it as a generator. Why are we plugging into the car to charge it? Why are we not turning it on and plugging the house into it and kind of going the other way? There's a lot of different ways to think. Obviously, there's efficiency factors there that need to be tweaked, but just start asking those questions. I think you can get some really interesting responses, or
yeah,
you can get things moving.
I got this fantasy where I go out and I build this Lake Flato-esque Olsen Kundig flat thing that just expands forever. It's this giant hat that's like 20 feet up in the air, and it captures the entire lot. The entire lot is covered. Maybe there's some light that comes through it, and then underneath it are these little things that we like, these things that don't touch the...
You've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah. So like a bunch of little follies with these indoor, outdoor areas, everything opens up to it, but all of it's covered.
You got to see... did you ever take any of those Japanese architect classes?
No.
Oh man, those Japanese guys are doing incredible stuff.
Yeah, they have been forever.
Incredible. Along those lines, yeah. This idea of low profile, really delicate, and super sophisticated structure to keep it up, to make it seamless. Kind of a 21st century forest,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
All right, well, future, what's going on? I mean, it's you got any travel plans?
Travel plans.
Spend a lot of time in the Carolinas. Go see your daughter.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
hanging out with my daughter. Her birthday's next week, so that'll be fun. I'll be there for a week and a half.
That's a long time away from the job site.
Oh yeah,
You gonna come back and
very
see
decompress and just explore the Carolinas. Honestly, it's beautiful. A lot cooler than here. So.
There's a typology from that side of the country. It's tobacco sheds.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen
Yeah,
those?
actually, we went to one a couple weeks ago when I was there.
They're so
They're
awesome.
awesome. Yeah.
It almost like in some of them it looks like a girl like twirling her skirt where like fans out, and it's got like a whole shed on the bottom of it.
The tobacco's on the outside, drying out. Everywhere.
Totally, it's a derivative off of the function of it, but I think that there's some beauty that's in it. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think travel is all about understanding how are these people solving problems. If you want to be a designer, you got to travel.
You have to see. You have to know what's out there. Yeah.
Well, the problems that we're seeing now are not. It's not the first time they've come up. They've come up multiple times, and just pick somewhere on the other side of the world that has similar climate, similar. Go check it out. See what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what I love doing.
The only question, I think, the last question I had, which really dealt more with your day-to-day activity, was how do you? So you just start with a slab. You're just arriving. I mean, what steps do you take to kind of ensure a successful delivery? I mean, because again, it's completely different. There's you're not delivering lumber packages and all this other stuff. You're setting up this giant machine. So what are some of the little things you do when you first arrive to kind of help set you up for success?
Yeah, that's a good question for sure. That's my bread and butter every day. So obviously our site, the goal is it's a lot cleaner than a typical site because we don't have the same amount of waste or type of waste even.
Yeah.
So making sure that around the slab we have compacted soil because we're going to have this very heavy machine moving around. So that's one of the biggest things as well is getting details and specs for the compactness around there. The machine doesn't need too much. We need power, obviously, but that's coming. That's the engineers take care of that. Just make sure that the distance isn't too extravagant. That we have a T-pole close by and water. Obviously, we're using concrete, so we need a lot of water, consistent water, and then making it comfortable for the team. That's kind of the biggest one. Make sure we have a place where quality control can set up and do their tests, but we can get around the site comfortably and safely because we do have this big machine that the best way to think about it is it's not trying to hurt you, but there's so many opportunities to get hurt by this giant 3D printer moving silently. It's all electric, so it's super quiet.
Right. Wow.
It's super dangerous. Find the pinch points before they become reality.
Yep.
With fatigue, and it's 118 degrees outside, and they've been looking at it for 6 hours. Do you guys have cooling stations? Are you guys covering slabs? Are you guys mandatory off hours? Only 2 hours, 2 on, 2 off?
Right. We're kind of discovering all that right now, but taking experiences again from being out in the field and fire department. We have cooling stations. We have the guys have little backpacks on, camelbacks, and make sure they have clothes that is breathable, But then we also have OSHA, so there's also the code that you have to follow.
Sure.
That's our code out in the field, Honestly, that's really what it is. The machine is also tons of trip hazards. You have cables everywhere. You have water. You have electrical. You have like open gears in some cases, depending on the project. Presenting all that to the team, making sure the team understands that they're confident and they have access to all the tools they need. So our material, making sure that they have access to it. It's not going to be in a real windy environment either, so it's not blowing on all of us.
Yeah.
You don't want a bunch of stuff being blown around the site as well. Making sure the clients have access, the appropriate access, I'll put it that way.
You definitely don't want them wandering around
and
thinking, well, I own the place, so I can do what I want.
That happens.
No, this is dangerous. It's an active job site. So.
It happens a lot on traditional construction. People just show up and this is a little different. There's a lot of places you can get hurt. And if you're looking at something, the machine could be right behind you.
Yep.
Which stinks because it's a unique product and everybody gets so damn excited about it. But at the same time, it's like you don't understand you don't understand the safety precautions that you have to take.
Everything's heavy. Everything is expensive. Everything. So, again, going back to the fire department, everything was made to be under extreme conditions and work with very little maintenance. So.
You seem like a pound set, man. You've had so much exposure to so many different things that's made you uniquely you, and that you can use that to be able to make different products. Like you've got real life experience, and for whatever reason, if it's holding a boom arm from camera crew shooting some film, or if it's working for the fire department, you use those as lessons. You journaled them, and then you turned it into and a thing that's made you a better in this capacity, a builder.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, another thing is it's a machine, so it doesn't need to turn off at 6 o'clock. It can go on. Some projects can, depending on the context and the neighbors, you can print 24 hours. So that's another thing, how to set up the teams, how to set up the the crews to prepare for that. At night brings up a whole nother issue.
Yeah, I'm sure.
With again, the material and against the pinch points, this thing is big. And finding that cadence, like every industry has a natural cadence. So I think just now getting a handle of what that cadence is with this technology, so it can be more defined and precise with the scheduling that I do as well.
Yeah. So another question: how far do you take the project? Really from start to finish, or you do the printing and then you kind of move on to the next one and the next one, or are you overseeing the entire, like the full completion of the?
No, currently no. So that would be there's different types of projects. Most of them are just printed, just a wall system, and they're handed off to the other trades to complete, and we keep going on to the next adventure.
So you don't have to come and like check back in on the framer. There's a whole nother
crew,
representative that
yes,
comes.
absolutely.
Okay. Gotcha. So yeah, it's definitely streamlined. It feels like more of a production line, where you're just cranking these things out. And
yeah, it needs to be to get the economy of scale to come down and make it. Ultimately, the goal is to give everybody a home, affordable housing. But the only way you can get there is to make a lot of homes, make them accessible, make them cheap.
Yeah. Mark, are you gonna get one? You gonna get a 3D printed house?
I gotta be able to afford it. Heck yeah, I could get one of those bad boys. Yeah.
Well, Luis, it's been great talking to you. I definitely want to get you back on, especially as the industry changes and more things are developed, and it seems like it's constantly changing every day. I want to get you back on and pick your brain some more. But I really appreciate your time today and talking with us. And so, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Appreciate it.